You know, there's a certain kind of silence that only comes when people stop taking you seriously. It's the kind of quiet you feel in a grocery line when the cashier talks louder to you, like you're half deaf, or when a younger man smirks while explaining how a smartphone works, as if you didn't live through the invention of the computer itself. I got used to that silence. I thought I had to, until the day a man named Darren pushed me a little too far. I live in a small town just outside Flagstaff. Pine Ridge, that's what they call it, a place where everyone waves, but no one really knows your name. My house sits at the end of Maple Drive, a modest place with a porch that creaks and a yard that's seen better days. I'm 71, widowed 5 years now, and for the most part, I mind my own business. Coffee at 6, radio on low, maybe a walk if my knees cooperate. Life had gotten quieter, smaller, predictable, until he showed up next door. Darren was the kind of man who made sure you noticed him. Big truck, big voice, bigger ego. He and his buddies moved into the old Miller place after the bank repossessed it. At first, I thought he was just another young man trying to build something. But it didn't take long before the shouting started, late-night parties, barking dogs, trash piling up. He turned that quiet cul-de-sac into a war zone. I tried being polite. I really did. One morning, I went over to ask if they could keep the noise down at night. I hadn't slept properly in weeks. He looked at me, right through me really, and said, "Sure thing, Grandpa. Maybe try some earplugs, yeah? They sell them at your pharmacy discount." His friends laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. I walked back home, heart pounding in my chest, half from anger, half from something else, embarrassment. That word Grandpa didn't sting because of my age. It stung because of the way he said it. Like I was done, like I was finished. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. My fence got accidentally broken. Someone dumped trash in my yard. My mail went missing. I started keeping notes in a small spiral pad, dates, times, what I saw. A habit from my old job, one I hadn't mentioned to anyone in years. See, before I retired, I wasn't some tired old man with a creaky porch. I worked in private investigations, insurance fraud, surveillance, the kind of cases that taught me how to disappear in plain sight and make people tell the truth without saying a word. But I'd left all that behind, or at least I thought I had. One evening, I saw Darren yelling at a delivery driver. He shoved the poor kid, called him every name in the book. The next morning, that same kid came by and apologized to me, said Darren had mentioned, "The old man next door always complains." That's when something inside me shifted. He wasn't just being rude. He was using me as his excuse, the harmless old man, the scapegoat. And you know what? That was his first mistake. I started watching him more closely. When he left for work, when his friends showed up, what time the noise usually started. I learned his patterns, his weaknesses, his habits. Most people assume old age slows your mind. Truth is, it just quiets it enough to see the patterns others miss. Within a week, I knew more about Darren than his own friends did. Then, one night, I heard glass shatter. I looked outside and my heart stopped. My garden lights were smashed, my mailbox on the ground, and in the glow of his porch light, I saw Darren standing there, beer in hand, laughing. He looked right at me and said, "What are you going to do about it, old man? Call the cops? They'll take my word over yours any day." He was right, at least partly. People see what they expect to see, and they expected me to be harmless, weak, so I gave them exactly that. The next morning I went over and smiled. I said, "Yeah, you know, Darren, maybe we just started off on the wrong foot." He blinked, surprised. "Tell you what," I continued, "how about a fresh start? I've got some tools in my shed. Maybe I can help you fix that loose gate." He grinned, shook my hand, and for a moment he thought he'd won. That's when I knew he'd never see it coming, 'cause I wasn't just planning to fix his gate. I was fixing my piece. I started small, collecting information. His license plate, the noise violations, every little thing he did wrong. I filed quiet reports. I used an old contact at the county office to check on property taxes. I wasn't breaking any laws. I was simply observing. But Darren had a way of digging his own grave, and sure enough, one night, I caught something on camera that would change everything. He didn't know I had cameras. Hidden ones that looked like porch light sensors. That night, they caught him and his friend siphoning gas from a parked car, mine. That was the moment I stopped being The old man next door. That was the moment I started my quiet revenge. I didn't sleep much that night. The hum of the security monitor on my desk seemed louder than usual, and I must have replayed that clip at least 20 times. There was Darren, plain as daylight, stealing gas from my car while his buddy laughed. It wasn't the theft that got me. It was the smugness, the confidence that I wouldn't or couldn't do anything about it. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching the steam curl in the sunlight. For a long time, I thought about calling the police, just reporting it, letting them handle it, but I knew better. Guys like Darren had a way of charming their way out of trouble. He'd cry misunderstanding, maybe toss me a few bucks for damages, and go right back to being a bully. No, this needed something smarter, quieter, permanent. I started digging into my old toolkit. Not the hammer and screwdriver one, the other one. The one filled with USB drives, adapters, and an old laptop that still ran some software most people didn't know existed anymore. I hadn't touched that world since my wife passed, but the skills never left. You'd be amazed how much a person reveals without realizing it. Darren, for instance, had a habit of leaving his Wi-Fi unsecured. Within minutes, I was inside his network. Nothing illegal, just observation. Open ports, shared files, devices named Darren Phone, Truck Cam, and Ring Front. It was like walking through an unlocked front door. He didn't even have a password on one of his old cameras. What I saw next made my stomach twist. The camera feed from his garage showed boxes. Not tools, not car parts, but new appliances, still in packaging, with store tags. Stolen goods. He wasn't just a loudmouth. He was running a petty theft ring out of his own house. Now, I didn't want to ruin someone's life, but I'd lived long enough to know that people like Darren only stop when someone stronger stands in their way. And I was done pretending I wasn't strong. For the next week, I became invisible again, the quiet old man trimming his hedges, waving at the mail carrier, feeding the stray cat. But behind that calm, I was building a file. Every night, I documented dates, screenshots, even sound recordings of their wild parties. I started collecting witness statements without anyone realizing it. A few neighbors had complained privately, but never took action. When I showed them what I had, their eyes widened. One woman, Linda, said, "Oh my God, I thought it was just me." We became a quiet little alliance. 3 neighbors who'd had enough. I showed them how to record legally, how to file noise reports properly, how to document property damage with timestamps. Darren was creating his own undoing, and we were just letting the evidence speak for itself. Then came the turning point. It was a Friday night, a big one for his crew. Music blasting, cars parked on both sides of the street. I noticed something unusual on one of my hidden cameras. Darren opening his truck bed, pulling out what looked like construction equipment. Except it wasn't his. I recognized one of the stolen logos from a local contractor's ad on TV. I called an old friend. Retired police now, used to work investigations with me. I sent him a small encrypted video clip, no names attached. "Just look into it," I said. He called me back 2 days later. "You didn't hear it from me," he said, "but that gear's been on a theft report list for months. Someone's about to get a visit." By the end of the week, 2 unmarked cruisers rolled down Maple Drive. Darren was outside mowing his lawn, pretending to be a good citizen. When the officers stepped out, I swear I saw him smirk at me, like he thought I'd finally called them about the noise. That smirk didn't last. They talked to him for a good 20 minutes. His voice started rising, his hands waving, his face turning red. Then they popped his truck open. The next thing I knew, Darren was in handcuffs. His friends were peeking from the porch, their laughter gone. Now here's the funny part. I didn't report him directly. I didn't have to. I just gave the truth a gentle nudge in the right direction. For a week after that, the street was silent. Peaceful, birds chirping, wind moving through the trees. I thought that was the end of it. But some men don't learn when they get caught. They just get angry. 3 weeks later, he was back. Charges dropped. Something about insufficient evidence tying him directly to the thefts. The system worked in his favor again. And the first thing he did when he saw me outside? He grinned. That same awful grin. "Guess I'm back, old man," he said. "You miss me?" That night, I heard something that made my blood run cold. the sound of my back door handle being tested, slowly, carefully. I didn't move, just sat there in the dark with my phone ready. It didn't open. Not that night. But I knew what was coming, so I decided to stop waiting. I stopped being on defense. Because Darren thought an old man couldn't fight back. He thought wrong. The next morning, I woke up with a strange calm. It's funny, the kind of peace that settles in you when you've made a decision you know can't be undone. The coffee tasted stronger that day. I put on my flannel jacket, opened the back door, and took a long look at the yard, the broken fence slat, the dent in the mailbox, the faint scrape marks on the garage door. Every little scar told me one thing. Darren thought fear was control, but I'd lived too long to let fear run me, so I started a little project. I called it the insurance policy. It began with an old motion sensor I had stored in my shed. I wired it to a small silent camera facing my backyard, then another watching the alley where Darren liked to walk his dog. Every time movement was detected, a copy of the footage was automatically uploaded to a cloud drive I'd created under a fake name years ago. Nothing fancy, just quiet, relentless observation, but I didn't stop there. I went to the hardware store, bought a few things that didn't raise eyebrows, nails, wood, a padlock, a new mailbox. While I was there, I overheard Darren joking with the cashier, telling her how the old man next door was scared of shadows. The way she laughed with him stung more than I expected. Not because she believed him, but because it reminded me how easy it is for people to dismiss the elderly. They forget we've seen it all before. That night I began phase 2. I slipped a little note under Darren's door. No threats, no handwriting, just a single typed line. You really shouldn't steal from people who know more than you think. I didn't sign it. I didn't even wait for a reaction. I just went back inside, made myself a sandwich, and turned on the TV. But through my window, I saw him come out, pacing, scanning the street, whispering to one of his friends. The paranoia worked fast. Within days, Darren had installed new locks, turned off his outside lights, and started watching his own cameras obsessively. I even caught him walking around with a baseball bat one night. He didn't know it yet, but he was already playing my game. One evening, I was sitting on my porch reading when he came over. Tried to play friendly. "Hey," he said, pretending to smile, "someone's been leaving weird notes." "You seen anything?" I looked up slowly, gave him that half-distracted old man look, and said, "Notes? No, but I did hear someone sniffing around your house the other night." "Thought it was you." He froze for a second. "You heard something?" I nodded. "Footsteps. Around 2 in the morning? You might want to check your cameras." And that was it, the seed planted. The next week was delicious chaos. Darren started accusing his own friends of betraying him. His girlfriend moved out after a screaming match in the driveway. He disconnected his internet for security reasons. Every day he looked more tired, more nervous. And I just kept tending to my garden, nodding politely when we crossed paths. Then one night, around midnight, I heard something slam, my side gate, a rustle near the shed. My cameras came alive, sending clips straight to my phone. There he was, Darren, sneaking across my yard, flashlight in hand. He wasn't trying to scare me this time. He was looking for proof. I stayed quiet in my living room, lights off. Let him wander a bit. He reached the shed door, pulled it open, and the motion sensor kicked in. Bright floodlight straight in his face, and a small speaker I'd rigged crackled to life. You really shouldn't steal from people who know more than you think. His scream echoed through the night, like a broken siren. He stumbled back, tripped over the garden hose, and bolted through the gate. I watched him run down the street, arms flailing, flashlight bouncing. By morning, the whole neighborhood knew something had happened. Linda stopped by, half whispering, "Did you hear Darren last night?" He was yelling about ghosts. I just smiled. Poor boy needs sleep. For a week, he avoided me completely. Wouldn't make eye contact. Then came the twist I didn't expect. A police cruiser parked outside his house one afternoon. 2 officers came to his door, calm but firm. After half an hour, they let him out. Turns out, someone had anonymously sent the police a collection of video clips. Stolen goods, aggressive behavior, attempted break-ins. The evidence was airtight. Every file time-stamped, neatly compiled, and every file traced back to his own devices. because while he'd been so busy worrying about being watched, he'd never realized I'd planted one small tracker, just one, in a Bluetooth speaker he'd stolen from my porch months earlier. It had been quietly syncing data every time he connected it to his phone. They say revenge doesn't solve anything. Maybe that's true for some. But for me, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like balance. That night, I sat on the porch with a cold drink, the air finally still. For the first time in months, I heard crickets again. No shouting, no engines, no broken glass. Just peace. I thought about writing it all down. How a quiet old man fought back without lifting a hand. But some stories are better kept between the wind and the trees. Still, sometimes I catch myself smiling when I see a moving van drive past. Darren's gone, off to wherever men like him go when their confidence collapses. And me? I'm still here. Still the old man on Maple Drive. Still underestimated, but never again ignored. It was almost 4 months later when the silence broke again. The seasons had shifted. The air sharper, the trees barer, and I'd started to forget what Darren's voice even sounded like. But one Thursday afternoon, as I came back from the grocery store, I saw it. A familiar car parked 2 houses down, engine off, windows tinted. I didn't need to see his face. I just knew. Darren was back. He wasn't supposed to be anywhere near me, not with that restraining order in place. But I could feel his presence like a shadow that had been waiting for the sun to move. My heart didn't race, not this time. I'd lived through wars, loss, and betrayal far worse than one man's bruised ego. What scared me wasn't that he'd returned. It was that he hadn't learned. That evening, I turned off the lights and sat by the window, letting the reflection hide me. Through the curtain, I saw him pacing near the mailbox, hood up, head swiveling. He looked thinner, maybe meaner, but still full of that restless anger men carry when they've lost control of their own story. At 11:42 p.m., the doorbell rang. 3 slow presses. Then silence. I waited. He wanted a reaction. That's what bullies feed on. Acknowledgement, the taste of your fear. I gave him nothing. When the knocking started, louder this time, I just sipped my tea. Then finally I spoke quietly, almost to myself. Still haven't learned when to walk away, huh? I heard him pause outside. Then a sharp voice, "You think you won, old man." I smiled, half to the darkness. I didn't have to win. You just had to stop. He kicked the door. Once, twice. Then the floodlight kicked in, bright as judgment. My cameras lit up one by one, recording every angle, front, side, driveway, even the alley. His face caught in full clarity, rage twisting his features. I didn't shout. I didn't call the police. I didn't need to. Everything I needed was already being saved to a cloud he couldn't reach, with timestamps, geotags, and a fresh set of evidence. He realized too late that the light wasn't just to scare him, it was to expose him. "Smile for the record," I said softly. "You're already live." He froze, half blind, half terrified. Then he spat on the porch and ran off into the dark. The next morning, I printed a single photo from the footage, his face, mid-yell, bathed in light, and mailed it anonymously to his parole officer. No note, no name, just the image. 2 days later, he was gone again. Arrested for violating the restraining order, caught with trespassing and harassment charges stacked on top. But this time, something in me didn't feel triumphant. Sitting on that same porch, watching the leaves gather at my feet, I felt old. Not tired, just aware of time, how much of it I'd given to defending my peace from someone who couldn't build his own. Linda came by with muffins that weekend. She always baked when she was worried. "You heard?" "They took him in again," I nodded. "I heard. You must feel relieved." "Relieved," I said, tasting the word. "Or maybe just done." We sat there for a while, 2 old souls in the amber light, saying nothing. Sometimes silence is the loudest victory there is. Later that night, I found myself digging through old boxes in my attic, old photos, receipts, even a medal from when I served overseas. I stopped at one picture, me and my late wife, in front of our first home. I looked so young, so sure of myself. She used to say, "Don't waste your energy proving people wrong. Spend it proving yourself right." For years, I'd forgotten what that meant. But maybe, just maybe, that night I started to understand. The next morning, I took down every camera, Every wire, every lens, every little eye that had been watching for danger. For the first time in a long while, I didn't want to record life. I just wanted to live it. And as I packed away the last cable, I looked across the street, where the morning sun hit the empty driveway Darren used to park in. I whispered, "You thought I couldn't fight back. You were wrong, but what I really meant was, you thought I needed to, because by then, I didn't." It's funny, isn't it, how peace sneaks up on you. It doesn't crash through the door like trouble does. It drifts in quietly, like sunlight slipping through old curtains you forgot to close. That's how it happened for me, after all the shouting, all the proving, all the nights staring at the porch waiting for a ghost that wouldn't come back. Months passed. Then seasons. The house stopped feeling like a fortress and started feeling like a home again. I'd walk past those empty camera hooks, the faint outlines still on the wall, and I'd smile instead of flinch. The quiet no longer scared me. It healed me. Linda still came by every Friday. She'd talk too much, laugh too loud, bring muffins that could double as paperweights, and somehow I loved every bit of it. It reminded me that life keeps finding ways to fill the spaces you thought were permanent losses. One evening, as we sat outside watching the sunset fade into the oaks, she said something that stuck with me. "You know, you never really lost," she said. "You just stopped letting someone else define what winning meant." I didn't answer right away. I just stared at that horizon, orange bleeding into purple, and thought about how right she was. When you're young, you think fighting back means shouting louder, hitting harder, showing everyone you won't be broken. But when you've lived as long as I have, you learn that real strength. It's quiet. It's in the patience it takes not to react. It's in the grace it takes to move on. A few weeks later, I got a letter, handwritten, no return address. Just a folded sheet of lined paper inside an envelope that looked like it had been through a storm. The handwriting was shaky, uncertain. "But I recognized it, Mr. Collins," it began. "You don't have to forgive me. I just needed to say I'm sorry. For everything. I lost control of myself, and you didn't deserve any of it. You were the only one who ever tried to help me, and I paid you back with anger. I'll never ask you to write back. I just wanted to tell you that you were right. Some lessons hurt, more than prison ever could. No signature." But I didn't need one. I read that letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and placed it in my old oak drawer beside my wife's picture. It wasn't about forgiveness, not really. It was about release, his and mine. That night I went out to the porch with a cup of tea and let the crickets fill the silence. For the first time in years, the world felt still. Not empty, still. You spend your youth chasing victory, and your old age realizing it's peace you were after all along. A week later, I visited the community center. They were looking for volunteers, mentors for kids who'd had rough starts. The kind of boys who might grow into men like Darren if no one stopped them soon enough. I signed up before I could talk myself out of it. The first day, a boy named Marcus asked me, "Why do you want to help us, old man?" I smiled, because I know what happens when no one does. He laughed at that, but something softened in his eyes. Maybe he saw that I wasn't there to preach, just to listen, and maybe that's the point. Every hurt, every betrayal, every battle I fought, it wasn't wasted. It built the man who could sit there and tell a lost kid, "You're not alone, and you don't have to fight the world to be strong." Some evenings, after the sessions, I'd take the long way home, pass by the fields turning gold in the twilight, listen to the hum of the cicadas. I'd think about all the versions of myself I'd been. The proud husband, the broken widower, the angry neighbor, the man behind the cameras, and for once I didn't hate any of them. They'd all done what they had to do to survive. Now, I just wanted to live. Linda caught me one morning sanding down the old porch rail trying to make it look new again. "Starting another project?" she teased. "Finishing one," I said. "This place saw too much of who I was. Time it saw who I became," she grinned. "You sound like a poet," I shrugged. Maybe peace makes everyone a poet eventually. And as the day rolled on, the smell of fresh paint mixing with summer air, I realized this was the real fight I'd been waiting for. Not against someone else's darkness, but against the bitterness that tried to take root inside me. You can't change the past, but you can stop it from poisoning what comes next. The last entry I ever wrote in that old notebook was simple. Just 3 lines. He thought an old man couldn't fight back. But he never understood. I already had. I fought for my peace, and I won.